So the final piece of the puzzle is how do we implement the QuoteDriver, which of course is the client-side driver program that sets all the wheels in motion and will send the requests over to the Quote microservices for Handey and Zippy. And we're going to take a look at that. That's in the QuoteDriver.java file in the EX3 project in the WebFlux folder in my Live Lessons GitHub repository. So here we are once again in the EX3 project. This time let's click down and take a look at the QuoteDriver. Before we do that, though, let's just take a quick look at the application properties. You can see here that we hardwire the client to talk to the gateway, which is at port 9080, and we give it the name client driver. You'll also notice that I've disabled the suppression of logging and debugging information, but just for kicks, let me put that back on, so that'll make the run of this thing a little bit less verbose. I think I commented it out because I was having some issues and I wanted to make sure I knew exactly what was going wrong. So here is the driver program. This driver program is a command line runner. And the reason we do it this way is because we're going to have to actually start up all the microservices running in the background. And we're not going to be able to use a Spring Boot test for this because there's multiple microservices. And Spring Boot test really only knows how to launch one microservice. So we're going to manually launch the microservices by running a script. And then we're going to run this program, which is going to act like a command line program. And then it'll contact the server through the gateway and do the request that will then flow via the gateway to the appropriate microservice. So we're going to send 10 quote requests per run. We have our quote client that's auto-wired to the proxies. We're going to have the main method, which is the entry point into our Spring application, parse any command line arguments we provide it, and then go ahead and actually run the application. And here's what run does on a command line runner. We're going to print out a little diagnostic saying we're starting the program. Then we're going to record how long it takes to do the Zippy quotes. We're then going to record the time it takes to do the Handy quotes. We're going to print the results and leave. So here is the mechanism to test how long it takes to get the Zippy quotes. Now keep in mind, this is important. The server, the microservices, and the gateway, by extension, are returning fluxes. And fluxes are inherently asynchronous. So how do we test to see whether things are working properly? Well, we're going to use a very cool feature which is used to do what's called step verification. And this is a unit testing framework, a CI/CD style framework that's baked into Project Reactor. There's also something equivalent with the RxJava reactive streams framework as well. Not identical, but very similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, StepVerifier, please create for me something that will run these quotes, and you'll take a look at that in a second. And that's going to return a flux. And then we're going to say, check to make sure we actually got 10 results back. And if we don't, then we didn't get what we expected. And then verify that everything works. And if something goes wrong, print out an error message saying that the Zippy run quotes method failed. So just for kicks, let's go look at run quotes. So here's run quotes. And you'll see here what this does is run quotes is going to take the particular quote service we want, either Zippy or Handy, and it's going to call the proxies post quotes method, and we're going to pass in a random list of we're going to pass in a random list of quote IDs. So that's going to go, it's going to be between the number that we have in our either Zippy or Handy quotes database. We're going to find random quotes and see what they come back with. And then we're going to go ahead and get all the quotes. And we're going to get the count of the number of quotes. And we're going to return the selected random quotes using this particular technique. So that's what run quotes does. And we'll see how that all works when we run the program. And we should get back 10 of them. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make a list of common words from Zippy the Pinhead quotes that we're going to use to search for anything that matches this long list of words or parts of words. So to do this, we're going to take that list and we're going to call search quotes. And we're going to say we want to search the Zippy microservice database, passing in the list of things we're going to OR together. And we should get back 114 of these guys. And let's take a look and see what that does. That just turns around and forwards through the proxy to the Zippy microservice, because that was the route name, and it looks for the list of queries. So it's going to find 114 matches. And then we're going to look for Zippy words that are used to search for all matches, not an or, but an and. So we're going to look for yow and yet. And in this, we're going to make a call to search quotes ex, passing in the quote and list and the Zippy microservice name. And that's going to forward over to the microservice through the gateway to get that list back. And there should just be 6 things that match that. So that's what we do for Zippy quotes. We also do the same thing for Handy quotes. The main difference is, of course, we're going to be working with the Handy microservice. So that's what we pass in as the route name as opposed to the Zippy microservice. And we're also going to have a different list of or and strings to look for because they're different quotes. So these are the ones we're going to have: dad, man, gold, stuff, poor, and cry. And when we do that search, we should get 14 matches. And then we're going to have another search that does the anding, where we do man and the, and we're going to end up with 4 matches there. So armed with all that, we can then come over here and say, run microservices, and hopefully all will go well. And momentarily, the run window should pop up as it compiles and builds this stuff. And then we'll start by starting the various microservices. You can see, of course, we're going to start by running the Eureka microservice because that's what everybody's going to register with. So that starts up, and you can see it's now up and running. And then we go ahead and start the gateway application, and it registers itself with the Eureka. And then we start up the Zippy application. And the Zippy application is also going to register itself with Eureka. And if you can see here, you can see that Zippy registered, and now the Handy microservice is up and running, so it's registering. One thing you need to be careful of, by the way, when you run these tests, and this applies for your application for assignment 2C as well. Because we're doing all this persistent stuff, it takes a little while for the microservices to actually get up and running. And if you try to run the test too quickly, they won't be initialized yet, and you'll get weird failures on the client side. So we just have to kind of wait for a minute or so till everything's all up and running. Another thing to remember, if you run the verify check task, Gradle task, which runs all the tests, you need to wait for it to finish running. It takes a while. And at any step along the way, you might think you're done, and you're like, why didn't it run all the tests? I think there should be 107 tests that ultimately run. And if you wait a bit, they'll all run. But if you stop prematurely and say it didn't finish them all, it's just because it hasn't finished running. OK, so everything should be up and running now. Let's go ahead and see if we can run the driver program, and hopefully everything will work. We will see. And so what this is going to do is it'll start up the client as a command line application, and it worked, which is great. So you can see that it searched the Handy quotes and the Zippy quotes, and it tells you how long it took to run everything. And I wouldn't put too much stock in the timing for these things. The reason that they're different is because I think Zippy has a lot more quotes than Handy does. So it just takes longer to do the queries on these things. But anyway, that's reassuring because it shows that everything worked properly and we got the results that we had expected.